Yeah, good evening, everyone. Everyone is able to hear me? Yeah, just a couple of minutes. Yeah, just a couple of minutes. Yeah, I'm just sharing my screen. So yesterday we have seen like we have written the DAO class. So where this DAO class will execute this data. Right? And now so let us write the test class. So let us write the test class. So let me say student service test. Student service test. I'll remove all this. Okay. So I'll say now test method, @test. Okay, so now I'll say public. Now I'll add this student. I need to test this method, right? I want to test this method. So this is the business method I want to test. So I'll say public void test add student method. Okay. So what I'll do now? Okay. So what I'll do now? I'll define the input. Okay. What is the input? So what is the input to be passed this method? Student object, right? So I'll say student equal to new student. I'll pass some dummy data. So student, this is not the original data, it is a tested data. So I'll pass some test one. Okay, I think this is an integer, right? So I'll pass some 2000. Student dot set student name. Student dot set student name. First name, sorry. First name. I'll give some test first name. Okay, these are dummy data. So that's why I'm giving some test data. Student dot set last name. Right? Because this is a test input, right? Define test input. Okay. Then I'll say student dot set email. I'll say test or I'll say something like test mail at the rate test.com. See, these are all test data. Okay. So this is what. Now I know that if I pass this record, what is the expected output? What is the expected output? This method will return an integer value. Okay. I have to give the attendance percentage also. Okay. What I'll do is I'll say student dot set attendance percentage. I'll give some 0.8 percentage, 80%. I know that if I pass 80% to any student, the output will be 1. Because if the percentage is greater than 60%, it is going to add this record in the database and it is going to return that value. It is going to return that means the number of records added. It is going to return the number of records. It is going to return the number of records added for this, right? What does execute update will do? It will, this records added. So execute update will return the number of records added into database. Added in database. Okay, if actually execute update returns 1, then data is inserted in database. If execute update returns 0, then data is not inserted in database. That means there is some issue. That means there is some error in the. That means there is some error in SQL query or data or SQL operation. That is what execute update is. If it returns 1 means the data is in database successful. So if this insert into student values get executed successfully, so this will return 1. Otherwise, it will return 0. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to do define expected output. What I'm going to do, I'm going to say now, okay, what I'll do now, I'll just see. So int, if I know that if student attendance percentage greater than 80% means I'll get the record added as 1. Expected record added as equal to 1. Right? Okay, now this is expected output. Now let me call the actual output. Okay, so execute update returns 1 if the data is inserted in database successfully, otherwise 0. That means the data is not inserted in database. That means there is an error in SQL operation. Suppose now let me know, let me get actual output. How I'll get? How will get the actual output? I have to call this method, right? To call this method, what is required? I have to get student def because I have to create the constructor of this. That means I have to do like this. Okay. So, and then I'll say service dot add student of student. And here I'll get int actual record added. Now what I'll say now, asset equals expected record added, comma, actual record added. That's all. Now let me run this test code. Run as JUnit test. See, your test case is passed. But only thing is, this test data got inserted in the database. I'll show you. Go to your student DB. You see the tested data, the tested DB got inserted in the databases. This is not the real data. This is not the real data, but it got inserted because of our test case. This is where your Mockito now comes. So this is where your Mockito now comes. So why? Because this is the real object. This is also the real object, right? Now, whenever we are calling this method, so percentage is greater than 60%, right? What the percentage I have said, 80%. So it is greater than 60%, then it is going to this add student method, and it is executing this logic, and it is returning the records added as 1 because the data is inserted in database successfully. You are getting 1. Okay. And so your actual records added will be 1. Your expected record added is already 1. I'm comparing both. You are getting the error. You are getting the success. But this is where your Mockito comes. So what I'll do is, instead of creating the real object of database object, This is where your DB logic lies, right? So instead of creating the real object, how will create Mockito? Student DAO is equal to Mockito dot mock of student DAO dot class. Right? So instead of creating the real object, we are creating a mock object because this is where your database logic lies. And we are placing the mock object here. So instead of creating real student DAO object, create mock object. Okay, pass student DAO mock object. Okay, into the student service object, into student service constructor. Now I'm just running the test case. Run as JUnit test. See, you are getting test failed. Can anyone tell why we are getting test failed? Why we are getting test failed? So this is the code actually. So this is your student service class. So this is a student service class, right? And so this is the student DAO object. Right? Right? Okay. Now see, this is my test code. Now I am passing now the mock object of student DAO and student service. And I'm calling, but student service is a real object. This is a real object. Because see, remember the difference between a real object and a mock object. If I create with the new operator, it is a real object. Real object means if object is created, created with the new operator. Mock object means if object is created with mockito.mock. Okay. Real object means if object is created with the new operator. Mock object means if object is created with mockito.mock. Okay. Now, this is student service is a real object. So this is a real object. This is a real object, right? So why we are creating mock object here for student DAO? Because it is the test data is going into this logic. We should avoid this. So what we are doing now, this is a real student service real object, but student DAO is a mock object, right? Okay, so now what we are doing is, now when I call service.add student, this is a real object, right? Service is a real object. So it will go to this method. See, that's why first line this is printing actually. See, this line is getting printed in add student method of student service class. In add student method of student service class. This is getting printed because service is a real object, the method is a real method, so it is going here. Now the student object, which student object this object got is passing. Now it is checking for get attendance percentage greater than 60%. Yes, it is greater than 80% greater than, but this is a mock object, right? Because in the student service, I am passing the mock object. This is the mock object. That means this is mock object, right? So this is mock object. Now when I call the method on the mock object, it will not go here. This call will not go here because it's a mock object. So the call will not go here. Okay. So since ideally it should call the mock logic, but I did not define anywhere mock logic here. Mock logic should be called, but I did not define the mock logic. So what will happen now? So what will happen now? Your records added will be 0. So some dummy response 0. Because the logic did not go here, the records added will be 0. That means your actual record added is 0, but your expected record added is 1. 1 is not matching with 0. So test case failed. So how to do that now? We have to write the mock logic, right? As I told you in the earlier example, how to write the mock logic. Here I told, right? Using when. Same thing I have to write here also. So what I have to do now? So I have to write like this. When, write the mock logic. Okay. Okay, write the mock logic. So what I have to do? When the mock logic should be on the mock object. Student DAO dot add student of student. Then I know that if it is 80%, it should return 1 record. Then return 1. That's all. This is the mock logic. That means in place of this logic, so in place of this original logic, we are just simulating the behavior. Whatever the DB logic is there, we are just putting that in as 1. We know that if the record gets exited successfully, we know that always this execute update returns 1. So that 1 I have put. So student DAO mock object behavior. Okay. That's all. Okay. Here we are not simulating logic, we are simulating the result actually. The result of, here we are simulating the result of add student method. Add student method of student DAO class. That's all. Now you run the test case now. Now you see test case passed. So what we are doing here, again I'll explain you. So this is the test case. This is the test case. Now, so this is the student service class. Right. So what will happen now? When now I'm creating a student object. Now I'm creating a student DAO mock object. I'm creating the real object of student service, and I'm passing this mock object here. Okay. Now this will be the logic of. This will be the mock logic of. See, only mock logics will be created only for the mock objects. Mock logic of student DAO object. Student DAO, add student method object. Add student method. Mock logic of add student. What we are telling? So when the mock object calls add student method, then return 1. We are simulating the result of this. From where 1 we got? We know that the student DAO add student method, if this record gets inserted successfully, we know that this execute update returns 1. So the same thing we are doing here. Whatever the result it is coming, this int result. So that 1 I am simulating here. Now I'll say service.add student of student. So it will go to the real method. So this will go to the real method. Why it is going to the real method? Because a real object. This is a real object. Because I created the real object with the new operator. Any object that is created with the new operator, this is a real object. So this is the real object. Right. Now, what we are doing now? So now when we call this add student method here, right? Now this logic gets executed. Now this gets printed. So this gets printed. Okay, this gets printed. Fine. Now I'm checking percentage greater than 60%. 80% greater than 60%. Yes. Now this is your mock object, not the real object. Now when add student method is called on the mock object, now we have already the logic defined. So this behavior calls when mock object add student method gets called, what we are returning 1. That means this record added will be 1 now. So we are returning 1, right? So this logic gets executed. When mock object add student method gets called, we are returning 1. So this record add will be 1. So what will be this 1? So now this will return 1. That means your actual record will be 1 now. Your expected record is how much? 1. Your actual record is 1. So test case is passed. That means when this is called, from this test case, so this logic gets executed. This mock logic. See, suppose I put here 2. Okay. So that means now this will be 2 now. In place of 1, 2. Suppose if I put 2 here, suppose I'm just putting 2 here. So now this will be 2. Okay. So let me run this test case. Now she got failed. You know why? Because expected is 1. Your expected record count is 1. But your actual count is coming as 2. Because it's returning 2 here. This is how this will work. Everyone understood? So that means whenever I say this one, so this will call the when logic. This will call the when logic in JUnit test case. When means this when. Right? Now you see, now it is not calling the, now it is not calling this a DB logic. Now we are avoiding, in this way we are avoiding passing test data to database. So in this way we are avoiding passing test data to database table. See, if I give, say for example, if I give here 0.6, for example, I know that my service class will take only greater than 60% only. Then only it will add the student. If it is less than 0.6, that's the record count is 0. That means my expected record added also is 0. No record will be added. My expected record added is 0 because the percentage is less than 60%. I mean, okay, it is not greater than or equal to 60%, it is less than 60%. I mean, it is equal to 60%. I have a logic only if it is greater than 60%. Okay. Now, so record added is 0. Here also I should say, so ideally, we don't need to define this because if it is greater than 60% only, that is going to your DO object. Otherwise, it is returning record. Okay, so what I'll do now, we don't need to define this. So what we have to do here, we have to add only if student dot get attendance percentage is greater than 0.6 only. Okay. So we should say or this one will say. Here, this one we have to say. Only this part. Only this mock logic we have to tell like this. Because this logic will be executed. When this logic will be executed, only when you call this method. That means if it is greater than 0.6. Okay, so you have to write like this. That's all. That's all. Now, if I run the test case now, so test case is passed, right? Because your expected record added is 0, your actual record also is 0. because this will be called only percentage greater than 60%. Everyone understood? Yeah, you can use JDK 11 also, not an issue. Okay. See, there is another way to define this. See, what I am doing here is like this, right? Mockito.mock. I'll write one more class here. So what I'll do, I'll write like this. @mock student DAO. Right? Okay, then I'll say @inject mocks student service. Student service. Right? Then I'll say @before each. So public void setup. Okay. Here I'll say mockito mockito annotations init mocks of this. So I don't need to define all this. So I can write like this also. So if you see here, the meaning, the same program I'm writing in this way. See what I'm doing, Okay. Next is test one. Now both are same. Both are same. Both are same. See, what we are doing here is, here, here we are creating like this, Marketo object like this, and creating the real object like this. But we can do with annotations also. Okay, so mock means this will be the, so when I say inject mocks means, okay, inject mocks means, see, this object will be a real object. This object will be a real object. And it injects, mock object, and it inject mock object. So what is mock object here? What is mock object? This one. Okay, so this is a real object. It injects mock object. Okay, so before each, right? So this gets executed before each test class, right? I told you this. So this gets executed before each test class. Before each test method, right? So what this does, this init mocks will initialize this. So this init mocks will create this as a real object. So this init mocks internally will create, okay, this will create this logic. This will create this logic. That means this part. It will create a real object, pass the mock object here. So this will create student service real object. Real object and pass student DAO mock object to student service class. To student service. So you don't need to write like this. You don't need to create a new operator like this. You don't need to write like this. Just define this annotation, this one and this one. That's all. Then you can use it directly here. Then you can use this object. So directly here. You can use this object directly here. You don't need to write these two lines. So just define like this. So this is a mock object. This will create a mock object. So mock means, what mock annotation will tell is this will create a mock object. So this will inject mocks means, so this will inject or this will take. So this will inject mock object, right? Student service takes the student object, right? Okay, so this method is actually like this before each I told you, right? In that JUnit test cycle I told you. So this annotation gets executed for every, that means this method gets executed before that each test method. And what this will do is, so this init mocks will create the student, whatever we are writing here. Here we are creating the real student service object, passing the student DO mock object here. Now the same thing it is doing. Now it will create this mock object and inject into service object. So it'll okay. This will create student service real object and pass a student DO mock object to student service class. So this is the another way of doing. Either you can do this way or either you can do this way. Both ways are same. This is the modern way of doing, like using annotations. This is the older way of doing. Okay. Any doubts till now? So with this, we completed mock it out. Okay. Yeah, it will be same only for JUnit test cover parent child classes also. For child class, you will create the child class object. For parent class, you will go for parent class object. So till now we completed JUnit and Mockito. So what is the next tool we are going here? So understood, right? So for parent child, you have to very simple. See, if you are calling child class means you have to call the actual method for child class. Parent class means parent class object you have to use. I mean, parent class method means you have to call through parent class object. So with these first tools are completed. The third one we are going to see is Maven. Okay, tomorrow I'm going to tell you Maven. Okay. So first two tools are completed, JUnit and Mockito. Any doubts till now? Previous videos, I think your madam has sent, right? If anyone is on previous videos, can you share actually? Yeah, Supriya Madam has shared actually. I'm just sending here. Okay. So tomorrow we'll start the new tool, which is Maven. Okay, Maven we are going to start tomorrow. Yeah, I'll upload this. I will upload all these notes in the classroom. Okay. All right then. So tomorrow we'll meet for Maven. Okay. Thank you all. See you tomorrow then. Yeah. Thank you all. This is the recording videos. Once again, I'm sending. Take the recording videos. All right then. Okay then. Thank you all.